Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's ranking Star Trek's Rogue Element. In this video, I rank all the characters from Star Trek that fall under a certain position and who I believe is best at performing that position. Now, this is part of a series of videos. I've done this for a lot of sort of straight up positions like Doctor, Captain, Chief Engineer. Now I'm getting towards the bottom of my list where I'm getting sort of coming up with stuff so I can include all the characters. And Rogue Element, of course, is not an official position. It's something that's sort of made up. But I think there is element to this, because most Star Trek shows have a character who just doesn't belong, who's just out of place, and kind of the outsider of the crew, but still, and kind of plays by their own rules and whatnot. But they're still helpful. They're still helpful to the crew. And so in this video, I will look at those sort of elements of those characters that kind of don't fit, don't belong, and play by their own rules. But I'm ranking them in order of which one is actually most helpful to the crew. And so, let me list the characters I have in store. So, as always, I only choose one character per Star Trek show. So there will not be more than one character, which I think in one case is a huge shame. But it's been my rules the whole time, so I gotta stick to them. Now, I don't have a character for the original series, because I don't think there's really a rogue element. I mean, you could argue that Spock is the outsider because everyone else is human and he kind of has a hard time relating to them. But that's not the name of the video. It's not about outsider, even though I gave that as part of a criteria. It's more of a rogue element, someone who plays by their own rules. And Spock is a very by-the-book guy kind of guy. And plus, I've already included him in two other lists. So, yeah, I just decided to forego the original series. And I suppose I could include Harry Mudd, but he was never really a member of the crew. I know there will be other characters on this list who aren't members of the crew of the show they're on, but they often work with the crew even though they're not official members, whereas Harry Mudd never worked with the crew. He always worked against them, so I am not counting him, plus I hate him. So I'm actually skipping over the original series for this list. So the characters who will be on my list for the Next Generation, I have Rolaren. She is definitely someone who always played by her own rules and was seen as a bit of an outsider, but would often work with the crew. There's, for Deep Space Nine, there's Quark, who is not a part of the crew, but often actually is helpful for the crew, and Quark most certainly plays by his own rules. But he often can be an asset to the crew, despite himself. And for Voyager, of course, is 7 of 9. I had to find a way to include her in one of these lists. 7 of 9, of course, definitely plays by her own rules. In fact, sometimes she outright defies orders and has her own sort of sensibility. But, yeah, huge help to the crew. And for Enterprise, I chose Shran, who's an example of someone who's not even on board the ship, although, to be fair, they were planning on making him a main character in Season 5, but Season 5 never happened. But he's often, even though he's, not on Enterprise and he's on a different ship, he often meets up with Archer and the crew and often lends them a helping hand. And he most certainly plays by his own rules, or at least the Andorians' rules. So, counting Shran. Now, for Discovery, I of course included Emperor Giorgio, who joined the crew at the end of Season 1 for Season 2, and then departed towards the end of Season 3. who of course was from the mirror universe, so she was like an evil dictator who mass murdered a bunch of people, but hey, let's have her help out the crew. Yeah. And for Star Trek Picard, I'm including Soji, who was an android, of course. I don't know if I'd say so much she played by her own rules, but she was definitely an outsider that didn't really fit in. And yeah, she did kind of play by her own rules, kind of more had her own personal agenda. Yeah. So, but she was, helpful to the crew. So, and then finally on the list from Lower Decks is Beckett Mariner, Ensign Beckett Mariner, who of course, most certainly, probably the most out of any of these characters on this list, played by her own rules. And she was helpful. From time to time, she actually saved the crew. She's very knowledgeable. She just is very apathetic and doesn't give a crap. So, let me go ahead and rank these rogue elements in order from not which characters I personally like the best, but from the characters I think who were most helpful to the crew, who were most of an asset, and that helped the crew succeed the most. And so at the bottom of my list is going to have to be Soji from Star Trek Picard, because she tried to wipe out all organic life in the galaxy. I think that is not very helpful to all organic life in the galaxy. Now, Picard gave an awesome speech, and she changed her mind, and everyone seemed to be cool with her by the end of the season, even though she tried to wipe out all organic life in the galaxy. But I don't think she was very helpful. So next on my list is going to be Emperor Giorgio, who is an evil dictator who mass murdered a bunch of people. Yet everyone seems to be cool with having her hang out and just make a lot of snarky comments and be rude to everyone and always talk about killing people. I can't think of any particular instance that she was that helpful. I mean, I suppose there was she did have a thing for Michael Burnham, so saved her life a couple times, and sometimes they needed a more ruthless hand than they had to get them out of some sticky situations. But I think more often than not, she was a bit of a hindrance more than a helping hand. And why are they having a mass murderer be part of their crew? I don't know. An evil person from the mirror universe. Anywho, let's get to the next person on my list, which is Beckett Mariner. Who actually, again, if this was about which character I like the most, she'd be more towards the top. I really like this character, but this is about how helpful they are to the crew. And sometimes, as I said, she can be very helpful. She's very knowledgeable. Sometimes some people say too helpful, almost like a Mary Sue, but that's going to be a different list. Keep an eye out for that one. Anyway, so Beckett Mariner, she can sometimes save the day. She saved Boimler more than once, but she also fucks things up a lot. She's really apathetic and doesn't care, and her tendency to really not want to be a senior officer actually kind of fucks things up sometimes. and she has this ability to be helpful and to help save the crew, and but sometimes she just doesn't want to do it, and is just too lazy to do it. Like, for example, the time where her best friend came on board and became the captain of Cerritos and made her the first officer, and she purposely did a shitty job because she wanted to get fired. That's not what I would call helpful rogue element. Anywho, so let's get to the next one on my list, who I think was actually very helpful, but he only ranks at number 4. And that's Shran from Star Trek Enterprise. I mean, in contrast to Soji, Shran helped save Earth. So that's extremely helpful. But of course, I suppose one of the main reasons why he doesn't rank much higher is because they met him from him torturing the crew, Archer and T'Pol, and one of Shran's underlings threatening to sexually assault T'Pol. So that's not very helpful. But they had a rocky start, to be sure. But slowly but surely, Archer gained Shran's respect, and then Shran became someone who, as I said, sometimes he betrayed Archer and tried to steal the Xindi device, but then he came through and helped Archer save. He basically, without Shran, Earth would have been dead and the human race would have been extinct. The Xindi would have wiped them out if it wasn't for Shran. I would argue that, because Shran helped distract it and he helped buy time for Archer to destroy the weapons. So I say, saving humanity, big brownie points for that one. Anyway, let's get to the next rogue element on my list, and that will be Ro-Laren, who is a character I absolutely love. She's one of my favorite characters ever, to be honest. And sometimes her attitude, her way of seeing things, her being practical, can be really helpful. I would argue that she was actually very helpful in the situation with the disaster, because she was able to provide the cold hard facts. The ship might get destroyed and they might need to sacrifice all these lives in order to save the rest of them. But, even though it turned out that Troy went against her advice and managed to save everyone because of it, it was still helpful for Troy to have that different perspective. And also, other situations, Ro-Laren, it really came in handy having a different perspective there. But, of course, she would also hinder the crew, like in their first meeting in the episode called Ensign Ro, where she defied orders and wasn't working with Picard. But eventually they did work together. But then, of course, she ended up betraying Picard for the Maquis, so that's not very reliable there. But so that's why she doesn't rank any higher. So anywho, let me get into number 2 on my list, which is Quark Quirk. And it's funny because Quark doesn't really like Starfleet. He constantly rails against the humans, but he's often very helpful. He's actually extremely helpful sometimes. His connections with the criminal underworld, they kind of play loose with it and let him get away with a lot of stuff, because they know that they can count on him if he has any information that they need. Of course, it will cost them, but it's also really helpful. And Quark has come in handy in more than one occasion in helping any crisis situation in Deep Space Nine that arises, helping to overcome it. Even though his first motivation is always profit, he somehow still comes in handy, and he's a very sort of witty and he does have principles. Like he was, the biggest thing, of course, Quark has probably did is that he helped Major Kira retake Deep Space Nine, and he saved her life and got her and Rom out of the holding cell, which is a huge deal. So, hooray for Quark! So, my number 1, however, best rogue element of Star Trek is 7 of 9. And it has to be 7 of 9. Even though, arguably, she could be a bit of a pain in the ass and refuse to listen, she did a lot for the crew of Voyager. She created the Astromestic Lab. I mean, they also credited Harry Kim, but come on now. He wouldn't have been able to do it without 7 of 9. And she was always there. She was always there to spot threats to the ship, assess them, and give them very practical, detailed information. Her nanoprobes have saved lives more times than I can count. And yeah, and she's often like been the most powerful asset that the ship of Voyager ever had. However, of course, she's very stubborn and argumentative, as I said, but the biggest example of this is when Janeway ordered her not to help the Horologian kill a member of species 8472, and 709 elected to ignore those orders and beamed the species 8472 alien over to the Horologian ship, where she knew it would be killed and murdered horribly, defying Janeway's orders. But in her mind, she saved the ship, which a good argument could be made that she's actually correct in this situation, that the whole ship of Voyager would have been destroyed had she not defied Janeway's orders. So if that's the kind of defiance you have, in contrast to, say, someone like Soji tries to wipe out all organic life in the galaxy, then that's actually not that bad. If the kind of defiance she has is the kind that saves everyone's lives. So most definitely we'll have to go with 7 of 9 as the best rogue element in the Star Trek franchise. So that is it for my ranking of the rogue elements of Star Trek. I have a couple more of these ranking videos left, but I have to say I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel now because I've done all the important ones. But I still have coming of age character. I have villain or adversary. That would be an interesting one. And of course I gotta do a ship. Which ship is the best ship in Star Trek? And then I'll end this out with the Mary Sue, as I talked about. I don't know if I should come up with a different name for that, because I know some people find that offensive, but for me it applies to both men and women. But anywho, yeah, Wesley's on that list, spoiler alert. Actually, there are more men than women on that list, just to let you know. But anyway, that's it for my ranking of Star Trek rogue characters. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my channel for all those videos I had just listed, and many more videos on Star Trek, as well as covering other shows like The Expanse, Better Call Saul, The Outer Limits, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.